The desert air burned with heat and the smell of gunpowder. Sergeant Miguel Torres crouched low behind a crumbling wall, dust coating his uniform, rifle tight in his hands. The crack of enemy gunfire echoed through the valley, bouncing between jagged cliffs. He shouted orders to his unit, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Move left, cover fire, go, go!" His squad of young soldiers trusted him completely. They weren't just fighting the Taliban, they were fighting for each other, for the families waiting back home, for the promise that their sacrifices meant something. Miguel pressed his cheek to the rifle stock and squeezed off a burst of rounds, pinning down an insurgent position. Moments like these felt endless. Life or death compressed into seconds. Yet in the back of his mind, even as bullets flew, he saw something else, the rolling green pastures of his family's ranch in Texas. The old oak tree where his grandfather once tied his horse. The small family cemetery where his grandmother rested beneath a stone cross. That land wasn't just dirt. It was memory, blood, and promise. Miguel had grown up hearing his father say, "This ranch isn't ours to sell, son. It's ours to protect." The radio crackled. Target secure. Enemy retreating. Silence followed, broken only by the wind sweeping over dunes and the heavy breathing of soldiers lowering their weapons. Relief spread through the squad, laughter mixing with exhaustion. They'd survived another day. That night, under a foreign sky littered with stars, Miguel sat on his cot, pen in hand. He wrote a letter to his mother back home, the kind of letter that never captured enough. "Ma, I'm safe. The guys are good. I keep dreaming of the ranch. Don't let anyone touch it. When I get back, we'll fix the fences and paint the barn. Tell Rosa I'll be home soon." He tucked the letter into an envelope, unaware that even as he wrote, forces thousands of miles away were already moving against him. Back in Texas, the air was very different. Warm, humid, heavy with the smell of freshly cut grass. Yet there was tension in the neighborhood near Torres Ranch. Karen Miller, the sharp-tongued president of the Homeowners Association, stood at the head of a polished oak conference table. HOA board members sat around her, flipping through files and documents she had prepared. Her nails tapped impatiently as she spoke. "This land is wasted," she sneered, pointing at a map of the Torres property. "Acres of prime development space. Shopping centers, luxury homes, millions in value just sitting there because some soldier thinks it's sacred." A nervous board member cleared his throat. "But, the Torres Ranch isn't technically under HOA jurisdiction." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Not yet. But with the right filings, forged signatures, and some cooperation from our friends at the county office, it will be. Who's going to stop us? He's thousands of miles away dodging bullets. By the time he comes home, it'll all be ours." A murmur of agreement circled the room. The plan wasn't legal. It wasn't moral. But greed had a way of drowning objections. Miguel lay awake in his cot, staring at the ceiling, unaware of the storm building back home. For him, the battle was still here, in the desert, where every sunrise meant another fight for survival. But soon, he would return to Texas. And when he did, he wouldn't just be a soldier fighting foreign enemies. He would be a man fighting for the soul of his family's legacy, against an enemy who looked nothing like the Taliban, but who carried the same hunger for destruction. The battlefield and the ranch were about to collide. The homecoming should have been sweet. After 15 endless months in Afghanistan, Sergeant Miguel Torres stepped off the bus in dusty combat boots, duffel bags slung across his shoulder. His uniform still carried desert sand in its seams, his face hardened by war, but his eyes softened when he spotted his mother waving from the crowd. "Mijo," she cried, hugging him tight. He breathed in the scent of home, tortillas, cotton fabric, familiar warmth. For a moment, the battles felt far away. But something gnawed at him as they drove through town. Neighbors turned their heads, whispering. Some smiled proudly at his uniform, others looked away as if guilty. His mother's hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. "Ma," Miguel said, suspicion growing, "what's wrong?" Her eyes watered, but she didn't answer. She just kept driving. When the truck turned down the dirt road toward the ranch, Miguel's stomach dropped. He saw it before the engine even stopped. A massive yellow bulldozer was rumbling across the land his family had owned for generations. Fresh trenches cut through the earth. The barn was half demolished, wood splintered and scattered. Worst of all, the bulldozer's steel claw hovered over the small family cemetery. And there, shattered, lay his grandmother's headstone. The stone cross broken in half. Flowers crushed under tire tracks. "No!" Miguel roared, leaping from the truck. His boots pounded the ground as he charged toward the machine. He waved his arms, screaming, "Shut it down! Shut it down!" The operator, wearing a reflective vest, froze in shock before killing the engine. Dust settled. Silence fell heavy. A smug voice cut through it. Well, look who's finally back from playing soldier." Karen Miller stood at the edge of the destruction, arms folded, sunglasses perched on her nose like a crown. Her pearl necklace gleamed against her pastel blouse, the perfect picture of suburban arrogance. In her manicured hand, she clutched a folder of documents. Miguel stormed up to her, fists trembling. "You desecrated my grandmother's grave." Karen smirked. "Correction. I removed an obstruction. This land belongs to the association now. The ranch was foreclosed months ago. You should have paid your dues, Sergeant." "My family doesn't even fall under your HOA," he snapped. "Oh, but you do now." She pulled a paper from the folder, waving it like a trophy. "See here? Signatures, filings, county approvals. All legal. All binding. While you were off chasing terrorists, your property was rightfully acquired for community development." Miguel snatched the document, scanning the lines. His jaw clenched. The signature at the bottom, supposedly his mother's, was a forgery. Sloppy, but enough to fool officials who didn't care to look deeper. "You forged this," he growled. Karen's smile widened. "Prove it." His mother's voice trembled behind him. "Miguel, I tried. They wouldn't listen. Every lawyer turned us away. They said the papers were valid." Miguel's blood boiled. All the discipline drilled into him in combat was the only thing stopping him from exploding. "You think because I was gone, you could steal what generations built with their hands?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You made a mistake, Karen." Karen's smirk faltered for the first time. But she recovered quickly, tilting her chin in defiance. "This isn't Afghanistan, soldier. This is my neighborhood. My rules. And if you don't like it, I suggest you pack up and leave, before you get fined into the ground." Miguel stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his glare. "Lady, you just declared war on the United States Army." Karen scoffed, but the bulldozer operator shifted nervously. Neighbors peeked from their porches, whispering. For the first time, Karen realized this wasn't just another homeowner she could bully. This was a soldier who had faced death, and who would not back down. Miguel knelt at the broken grave, running his calloused fingers over the cracked stone. He whispered in Spanish, a prayer for his grandmother. Then he stood tall, turning his back on Karen without another word. But inside, his mind was already moving like a battlefield map. He had fought terrorists overseas. Now, he would fight corruption at home. And he would not lose. The war for the ranch had just begun. The next morning, the Torres ranch felt less like home and more like a crime scene. The bulldozer tracks cut scars into the soil. The broken headstone of Miguel's grandmother stood as a painful reminder of the night before. But beneath his anger, Miguel's soldier's mind was already shifting gears: reconnaissance, intelligence, proof. "First rule of battle," he muttered, staring at the pile of forged documents Karen had waved in his face. "Know your enemy." Miguel spread the papers across the kitchen table. His mother and sister sat nearby, their eyes filled with exhaustion. Some of the papers bore county stamps, others signatures that were supposed to be theirs. Miguel's callous finger traced the handwriting. "This isn't yours," he told his mother, pointing at the scrawl that claimed she'd signed over the ranch. She shook her head quickly. "No, Miguel. I would never." "I begged them, but they said I was already in default." "Default on what?" Miguel asked. "HOA fees," she whispered. Miguel froze, then slammed his fist on the table so hard the plates rattled. "We don't even belong to their HOA. They fabricated everything." That afternoon, Miguel walked into the county clerk's office in uniform, his medals still pinned to his chest. The clerk behind the counter looked up nervously as he dropped the stack of papers on the desk. "These signatures are forged. I want to see the filings that allowed this so-called HOA to seize my property." The clerk flipped through the pages, her face paling. This was processed 6 months ago. It came with a judge's stamp. Miguel leaned closer. "Find me the judge's order." Minutes later, the file appeared. Miguel scanned it, his blood boiling with every line. The judge's ruling was based on unpaid fees and failure to appear at hearings. But the dates didn't match. The hearings had been scheduled while he was deployed overseas. "They pushed this through while I was in Afghanistan," he said, voice low, dangerous. "That's a direct violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." The clerk swallowed hard. "Sergeant, if this is true, then someone very high up signed off on fraud." Back at the ranch, Miguel dug deeper. He called on an old friend, Sergeant David Carter, a fellow veteran who had become a paralegal. Together, they went through the filings line by line. Carter shook his head in disbelief. "This is a full-blown racket. Fake dues, fraudulent contracts, even kickbacks to developers. Karen's HOA has been flipping properties from deployed soldiers for years. You're just the latest victim." Miguel's jaw clenched. Not a victim. Not anymore. They traced the scam to a shady developer who had been buying up ranch land under the HOA's name, then reselling it at triple the price. The paper trail was sloppy, a mix of forged signatures and county officials who either looked the other way or were paid to. Carter tapped a page with his pen. "Here. This deed transfer? The witness signatures are identical. Someone copy-pasted them." Miguel exhaled slowly, fury simmering. "So they forged my mother's name, staged hearings I couldn't attend because I was deployed, and then sold off pieces of my ranch like it was theirs." Carter nodded grimly. "It's organized theft. And if what I'm seeing is right, it's bigger than just your land. There are at least 6 other families in this county with the same pattern. Soldiers, widows, anyone too vulnerable to fight back." That night, Miguel stood outside under the Texas stars, the same ones he'd stared at in Afghanistan. Only now, the battlefield was here. He whispered to the wind, "Abuela, they tried to erase us. But they forgot one thing. I came home." The scam was bigger than Karen's arrogance. It was corruption, fraud, and betrayal woven together. And Miguel Torres was about to unravel it piece by piece. For the first time since stepping off that bus, he smiled. Not because the fight was over, but because now he had a target. And a soldier with a target was unstoppable. Miguel Torres had fought insurgents in the mountains of Afghanistan, but this battle was different. This time, the enemy wore pearls and carried clipboards. Yet he wasn't alone. Word of Karen's scheme spread quickly through veteran circles. By the end of the week, 3 trucks rolled up the ranch driveway, engines rumbling, flags fluttering from the antennas. Old friends climbed out, veterans with sunburned faces, broad shoulders, and a quiet fire in their eyes. Carter introduced them. "Meet Sergeant Johnson, Navy vet. And Corporal Williams, Marines. They've seen the same thing, property scams targeting deployed service members. You're not the only one, Torres. We've all been hit." They shook hands, the grip firm, unspoken brotherhood in every squeeze. Miguel felt the weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't fighting this alone anymore. That night, the ranch kitchen turned into a war room. Papers covered the table, laptops glowed, and empty coffee mugs piled high. Carter read out loud from the Service Members Civil Relief Act, tapping key sections with his pen. This law says no court can enter a default judgment against an active duty service member without their presence or a military attorney representing them. That's black and white. Every foreclosure Karen pushed through is illegal. Johnson nodded, his voice gravelly. And if she sold land under those rulings, that's fraud stacked on fraud. We've got enough here to bury her. Miguel looked around the room. Then we treat this like a mission. Intel, strategy, execution. We hit her where she doesn't expect, the law. She thinks we're just angry vets, but we're going to fight smarter than she ever imagined. The next day, the veterans marched straight into the HOA's weekly meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with beige walls and motivational posters about neighborhood pride. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members with forced smiles. As Miguel and his crew entered, conversation died. The room filled with tension, like the quiet before a storm. Karen's lips curled into a mocking grin. Well, if it isn't Sergeant Torres and his little fan club. Here to pay your overdue fees? Miguel dropped a thick folder onto the table. No. I'm here to serve you notice. Karen arched an eyebrow. Excuse me? Carter slid the folder toward her. Affidavits, evidence of forgery, proof of violations of federal law. We've filed motions to overturn every foreclosure under your name. And we're requesting a federal injunction against you and this board. The room went silent. One board member stammered, This is outrageous. You can't just. Miguel cut him off, his voice calm but sharp as steel. I fought overseas so people like you could sit in this air-conditioned clubhouse. And while we bled in the desert, you bled our families dry. That ends now. Karen laughed, but there was a crack in her confidence. You think a few soldiers with dusty uniforms scare me? I've got lawyers, judges, developers on my side. You're nothing but tenants in my neighborhood. Johnson stepped forward, towering over her. Lady, I buried friends overseas. I don't scare easy. And neither does a federal judge once he sees what you've been pulling. The veteran's presence filled the room with a pressure the board had never felt before. For the first time, Karen looked unsettled. Later that evening, Miguel walked the ranch fields with his mother. She carried a lantern, its glow flickering across her worried face. Son, do you think you can really beat them? Miguel gazed at the broken fences, the bulldozer scars in the earth. Then he looked back at the veterans inside, laughing like brothers around the table as they planned their next move. Yes, Ma, he said, voice steady. Because this isn't just about land. This is about every soldier who came home to find strangers trying to erase their families. They thought we wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. The war at home had officially begun, and this time, the soldiers weren't taking orders. They were writing their own. For weeks, the HOA board had been cornered by evidence. The veterans filed motion after motion, stacking federal law against them like sandbags before a flood. But Karen Miller wasn't the type to surrender. No, when pushed, she lashed out. The first strike came quietly. Miguel's mother found a notice taped to the ranch gate, code violations, unsafe livestock fencing. Immediate fines, $5,000. The next day, a tow truck tried to haul away his sister's pickup for illegal street parking. When Miguel blocked it, the driver muttered, "Lady paid me double to make it messy." By the third week, Karen wasn't hiding. One evening, as Miguel repaired a broken section of fence, headlights flared in the dark. A black SUV rolled up, windows tinted. 4 men stepped out, not neighbors, not board members. These were hard-eyed strangers with military haircuts and the swagger of hired muscle. "Nice ranch you've got here," one said, voice dripping with menace. "Be a shame if something happened to it." Miguel straightened slowly, hammer still in his hand. His veteran instincts read the men instantly, mercenaries. Karen had escalated. "You boys lost?" he asked coolly. The biggest one smirked. No. We're here to deliver a message. Back off, Torres. The HOA owns this land now. Keep making noise, and someone's going to get hurt. Miguel stepped forward, his shadow stretching long in the headlights. You think I haven't heard that before? I spent 15 months overseas with people like you pointing rifles at my head. The difference is, I'm still standing, and the people who threaten me aren't. The mercenary's grin faltered. There was something about Torres' calm, steady tone that cut deeper than any shout. Without another word, Miguel pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of their plates. By the way, he added, this conversation is now evidence in an ongoing federal case. The men exchanged glances. They hadn't expected resistance. After a tense pause, the SUV roared back to life, tires spitting gravel as they sped away. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, Miguel discovered something that made his blood run cold. The family cemetery, already desecrated once, had been targeted again. Headstones defaced with spray paint. Crosses snapped in half. His grandmother's grave dug up halfway, as if someone had tried to destroy it entirely. Miguel fell to his knees, fists digging into the soil. His mother sobbed behind him, whispering prayers in Spanish. This is war now, he growled. Carter and the veterans arrived within the hour. Johnson's jaw tightened as he saw the vandalism. This isn't harassment anymore. This is criminal. Desecration of graves is a felony. Williams scanned the spray-painted slurs. These thugs weren't just random muscle. They're pros. Look at the precision. Karen hired real operators. Carter frowned. Operators with access to gear, funding, maybe even foreign ties. That explains why federal eyes are on this case now. Miguel looked up sharply. Federal eyes? Carter nodded. Word is, CID and the FBI have taken notice. Karen's little scam might be bigger than she realizes. If she's working with foreign-backed developers or mercenaries, she just crossed into national security territory. That night, Miguel sat alone on the porch, rifle resting across his lap. The Texas night was quiet, but his instincts buzzed. He could feel eyes watching. Karen had underestimated him before, but now she had underestimated something bigger, the patience of the United States Army. From the shadows, Miguel whispered to himself, she thinks she's fighting a homeowner. She's fighting a soldier, and a soldier never quits. The line had been crossed. No more warnings. The battlefield was set. And Karen Miller, HOA Queen, had just made herself an enemy of the U.S. military. The morning after the graveyard desecration, the ranch was crawling with uniforms. Not HOA security this time. Real soldiers. CID investigators in plain clothes. A pair of FBI agents who arrived in unmarked black SUVs. Karen Miller's game had officially escalated beyond her understanding. Miguel stood with Agent Harris, a tall woman with sharp eyes, as CID specialists photographed the vandalized headstones. This isn't just property damage, she said grimly. This is federal. Graves of U.S. veterans were desecrated. That carries prison time, especially if we prove intent to intimidate military families. Miguel folded his arms. Karen thinks she's untouchable because of her HOA charter. But she hired muscle. Those weren't neighbors, they were mercs. Harris gave him a tight nod. We're already tracking them. One of the plates you captured? Fake, but the vehicle belonged to a shell company linked to a defense contractor. Somebody is funneling serious money into this little land grab scheme. By noon, subpoenas were rolling out like artillery fire. The HOA office was raided, documents seized, hard drives bagged. Karen's carefully polished smile cracked as agents swarmed the boardroom she once ruled like a queen. This is harassment, she shouted, slamming her manicured hands on the table. I am the president of this community. You can't treat me like a criminal. Special Agent Daniels, FBI, leaned close and whispered just loud enough for the board to hear. Lady, you sold a decorated soldier's ranch out from under his family while he was deployed overseas. You falsified signatures, laundered money through shell corporations, and hired mercenaries to intimidate witnesses. You're not a president. You're a felon." The room fell silent. Even her most loyal allies avoided her eyes. Back at the ranch, Carter and Johnson reviewed the files with the CID team. Evidence piled up fast: falsified auction records, offshore bank accounts, even a recorded phone call where Karen promised extra compensation to her hired muscle. Johnson let out a low whistle. She was sloppy. Greed always makes people sloppy. Carter's tone was colder. "This isn't just greed. This is betrayal. Selling land belonging to military families while they serve? That's a direct attack on the people who protect this country." Williams looked up from the files. "And now that the Army's involved, this stops being a neighborhood dispute. It becomes a matter of national trust. The people need to see that soldiers aren't left vulnerable when they deploy." That evening, Miguel received unexpected visitors. A convoy of Humvees pulled up the dirt road, dust swirling behind them. Out stepped Colonel David Richardson, Miguel's former commanding officer. "Miguel Torres," the colonel said with a rare smile. "Heard you were fighting another battle." Miguel saluted instinctively, though he was out of uniform. "Sir. Didn't think it would be on home soil." Richardson clapped him on the shoulder. "Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight here. Word of what's happening has reached the Pentagon. We don't abandon our own. The Army intends to make an example out of this HOA." For the first time since he'd come home, Miguel felt the crushing weight of isolation lift. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. Released on bail after questioning, she rallied what remained of her supporters. She painted herself as the victim of government overreach, claiming the Army had no place in neighborhood affairs. But the tide had turned. Videos of veterans standing guard at the ranch, of federal agents hauling away HOA records, went viral online. The story was everywhere: Army veterans' ranch stolen by HOA, U.S. military strikes back. Even politicians began weighing in. Senators demanded inquiries. Veterans groups rallied. The HOA scandal was no longer local, it was national. That night, Miguel walked the property line under a sky thick with stars. He paused at the family graves, now guarded by soldiers in uniform. "Abuela," he whispered, kneeling by the restored marker. "They tried to erase us. But the Army doesn't forget its own." Behind him, the sound of engines echoed faintly in the distance, more federal vehicles arriving, more reinforcements. The cavalry had come. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, victory seemed inevitable. The Army was on his side now. And once the Army moved, nothing could stop it. The courthouse in Austin was overflowing. Reporters crammed the steps, microphones thrust like bayonets, camera lights flashing. What began as a neighborhood dispute had transformed into one of the most talked-about legal battles in Texas. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. On one side sat Miguel, flanked by Carter, Johnson, Williams, and rows of veterans in pressed uniforms. Their silent presence filled the room with weight. On the other side, Karen Miller adjusted her expensive blazer, flanked by a phalanx of high-priced attorneys. Her confident smirk was back, though cracks showed in her eyes. The judge, an older man with a granite expression, entered. "This court is now in session." The prosecution opened strong. They presented property records, falsified signatures, and testimony from handwriting experts proving Miguel's ranch deed had been forged. One exhibit after another piled onto the bench: offshore bank transfers, HOA emails discussing targeting military families, even a contract with the mercenaries. Agent Harris took the stand. Calm and precise, she laid out how Karen funneled HOA funds into dummy corporations, then sold properties under the table to foreign developers. Her voice carried like steel. "Mrs. Miller didn't just break HOA bylaws," Harris declared. "She violated federal statutes, including fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy against active duty service members. This was not incompetence. This was calculated theft. Karen's lawyers countered with theatrics. They painted her as a misunderstood civic leader trying to beautify the neighborhood. They claimed the veterans were intimidating simple board members with military might. Karen even took the stand herself. She leaned forward, hands folded sweetly. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was only enforcing community rules. If mistakes were made, they were clerical. I've given my life to this neighborhood. Her voice trembled with manufactured emotion. A few of her supporters dabbed their eyes. But then the prosecution dropped the hammer. Your Honor, Harris said, we'd like to play a recording. The courtroom hushed as audio crackled through the speakers. Karen's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. Make it messy. Scare him. If the soldier doesn't back down, dig up his grandmother's grave. That'll send a message. A gasp tore through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Karen's lawyers froze, faces pale. Miguel's fists clenched, but Carter's steady hand on his arm kept him calm. The evidence spoke louder than any outburst could. The judge's gavel slammed. Order! Order in this court! By the afternoon, the trial had turned into a rout. Witnesses testified that Karen ordered illegal evictions. Contractors admitted she paid them under the table. Even one of her mercenaries, offered immunity, revealed she'd promised triple pay if they could drive Miguel's family off the land permanently. Every defense her attorneys tried crumbled under the weight of evidence. Karen's composure cracked. Her smirk vanished, replaced by wild eyes darting across the room. She muttered furiously to her lawyers, but they only shook their heads. Finally, the judge leaned forward, voice like thunder. Mrs. Miller, this court finds overwhelming evidence of fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, and targeted harassment of military families. The HOA charter is hereby dissolved. All illegally sold properties will be returned. And as for you. He paused, letting the silence hang. Karen trembled. You will be remanded to federal custody to await sentencing. The gavel slammed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Miguel didn't stop to speak. He simply raised his head high as veterans surrounded him like a living shield. Carter leaned close and said, It's over, brother. She's finished. Miguel exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. Yet deep inside, he knew Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She still had supporters, still had money hidden. And desperate people did desperate things. The war in the courtroom had been won. But on the battlefield of shadows, the fight might not be over. The sun was just breaking over the Texas horizon when Miguel rode the fence line one last time. For the first time in years, the ranch felt whole again. Soldiers had returned home, families were moving back into reclaimed houses, and the old family cemetery stood guarded and restored. But even as dawn painted the land gold, Miguel's instincts told him the war wasn't finished. Karen Miller wasn't the kind of enemy who surrendered quietly. He was right. 3 nights after the verdict, alarms blared. Security cameras caught movement at the ranch perimeter. Carter and Johnson were already armed before Miguel even reached the door. On the screens, shadows flickered, Karen's last loyal mercenaries, masked and armed, making one desperate push to torch the ranch and erase everything. They're coming hard, Johnson muttered, racking his shotgun. Miguel's jaw set like stone. Then we hold the line. The veterans moved with the precision of combat. Floodlights snapped on, blinding the intruders. From the barn loft, William's voice echoed, Drop your weapons. This property is protected by federal order. But the mercenaries didn't back down. Gunfire cracked in the night, bullets sparking against steel fencing. Horses screamed in their pens. The ranch was a battlefield again. Miguel dug behind a trough, rifle tight against his shoulder. His heart hammered, not with fear, but with the familiar rhythm of combat. He had fought in deserts halfway across the world, and now he was fighting for his family's soil. Carter's voice cut through the chaos, flank left. Push them toward the gate. Within minutes, the veterans drove the attackers into a choke point. Sirens wailed in the distance, FBI backup racing in. The mercenaries realized too late they'd been trapped. One by one, they dropped their weapons, faces pale in the glare of headlights. The fight was over. But Karen hadn't stayed away. As agents cuffed her mercenaries, a black sedan screeched up to the ranch road. Karen stumbled out, mascara streaked, hair disheveled, eyes wild. She screamed at the soldiers, at the agents, at Miguel himself. "This is my neighborhood. My rules. You can't take this from me." Miguel stepped forward, rifle lowered but eyes hard. "You took everything from everyone else. Families. Homes. Even graves. And you thought you could break soldiers the way you broke homeowners." Karen spat at the dirt. "You think you've won? Without me, this place will rot." Agent Harris appeared at Miguel's side. Her voice cut like a blade. "Karen Miller, you just violated your bail terms by aiding another crime. You won't see daylight again for a very long time." The agents pulled Karen back, her screams fading as the sedan's door slammed. When dawn rose again, the ranch was quiet. Smoke curled from spent flares, the cattle grazed as if nothing had happened, and veterans sat together on the porch, drinking coffee like they had after countless missions. Miguel stood at the family graves, sunlight warming the soil. He whispered, "It's done, Abuela. The land is ours again." Colonel Richardson arrived later that morning, presenting Miguel with a folded flag. "This isn't just about you, Torres. This is about every soldier who ever wondered if their family would be safe while they served. What you fought here, it sends a message. No one steals from our own." Miguel took the flag, his throat tight. For the first time since he'd come home, peace settled over him. Not the fragile kind, but the kind earned through fire. That evening, the community gathered. Families cheered as veterans handed back house keys. Children ran through the fields. And at the center of it all stood Miguel, not just a soldier, but the man who had led them home. Carter raised a glass. To the ranch. To the army. And to the fact that no HOA can ever outfight a soldier. The crowd erupted with laughter and applause. Miguel smiled, the weight of war finally lifting. Karen's empire was ash, but the ranch was alive. And it would remain alive for generations. The battle was over. The land was free. And Miguel Torres had finally come home.